Hello, and welcome to an all new episode of the Transfix Take podcast, where each week we deliver news, insights, and trends for shippers and carriers. It's the week of May 22nd. I'm Jenny Ruiz, and I'm joined by our market expert, Justin Mays. We got through Blitz week. How are you feeling?
Feeling good. Like we were talking earlier, I can't wait until this holiday weekend. Get that extra day off.
Oh yeah, we always love an extra day. It's actually the first, I guess, big pre-event of the summer, which was DOT Blitz Week. So we've got a lot to look forward to. But in looking at some of the charts for both the national average rate per mile and the tender rejection average, we're seeing both go up and to the right, and a lot of red in that heat map, as you predicted. Can you give us a retro on just how it went last week?
Yeah, of course, it played out very similar to what we anticipated, and that's following the trend that we saw last year.
Yeah.
The average national line haul rate per mile increased about 6%, going up from $1.58 per mile to $1.68. Now, the all-in average rate per mile only went up about 4.5%. That's kind of masked from the fuel continuing to decline and diesel prices lowering week over week for the
Okay.
past few weeks. And then jumping over to tender rejections, you're spot on. We saw tender rejections spike up. They started around 2.9% and they
Mhm.
reached above 4% last week.
Yeah.
But I will say, post DOT week, we're actually seeing rates fall back down faster than we saw last year.
Okay.
So I don't think we're going to continue to see the same trend going forward through Memorial Day weekend that we saw last year.
Okay, interesting stuff. It's certainly a different year than last year. Lots of surprises. That said, you know what? It's time for the regional breakdown. Now, the Midwest is stepping up as our region to watch this week. You'll see over the last week, rates rose just shy of 2% here, with almost a 4% increase in both short and mid hauls, and a 3% on those long hauls. What should we expect from the Midwest this week, Maze?
I think we're going to see the Midwest experienced the most momentum downward, to be honest.
Okay.
This upward trend was just really created by DOT week.
Yeah.
The one of the only lanes in the country that saw actual downward pressure through DOT week was the Midwest down to the Southeast, which we'll get to later.
Mhm.
But I think the Midwest, we are going to see some downward pressure. It's already started happening as early as Monday. So I think this is going to continue until the end of the week where we see some of that Memorial Day weekend pressure.
All right. And now the Northeast was not left behind, as of course, this region also saw some rate gains thanks to the Blitz. And it was certainly much needed as rates have been going down by nearly 6% over the last 2 months. But the hottest lane was that Harrisburg one, which had a rate increases of 4.5%. So my question to you is, will the Northeast continue to heat up, or are we going to go back down?
So your call out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that market actually caught me by surprise. It experienced a much larger lift in the average rate leaving that market than I would have anticipated originally.
Yeah.
But overall, I think we're going to continue to see the Northeast soften through the week before Memorial Day weekend.
Mhm.
Again, there are pockets of the Northeast that actually saw declines, and not to mimic what happened in the Midwest, but it's down to the Southeast and Florida, especially, where rates continue to its downward trend
Okay.
as Florida just becomes extremely hot for carriers right now.
It is certainly the biggest, I think, some of the biggest red that I've seen in a while. We'll get there in a second. But second to the southeast, this one, I guess, didn't catch me by surprise just because of its sort of placement in the map. But the coastal region saw the largest increase, with the Carolinas driving a lot of those gains. Fun fact, as we drive closer to June all the way through August, soybeans and peaches are the predominant crop to ship out of the Carolinas. But that said, a nearly 4% increase happened in the coastal region, with mid haul rates up nearly 7%. So my guess is maybe this is going to continue through Memorial Day weekend, but what do you think, Maze?
We will continue to see a trend increasing for parts of the coastal,
Yeah.
especially for the freight that's going up to the Northeast and Midwest. That's where we saw a lot of the pressure through DOT week. It's that
Okay.
mid haul going back to the major markets in the Midwest and the Northeast. Surprisingly, we even saw some rate pressures for freight picking up in the coastal region going down to the Southeast.
Yeah.
Um, I think we're going to continue to see the coastal region slightly increase its tightness through the next couple of weeks, as we would traditionally expect going farther into produce season. But I don't think we're going to continue to see such momentum that we've seen in the last week.
Okay. This next region really took me by surprise. I could have sworn up and down that this was going to be like the name of the game for the West Coast, but it actually had the most modest increase of all the regions. Interestingly enough, all markets in the Pacific Northeast, like Portland, Pendleton, Seattle, and Spokane, actually decreased. And then your West Coast fun fact is that Arizona and California dominate lettuce production, with California accounting for about 70% and Arizona around 29%. But the question remains, will the West Coast maintain its neutral ground for the next couple of days?
I don't think it will. I think we're going to continue to see pressure in the southern part of the West Coast. So we are still seeing it in Arizona.
Mhm.
But I think we're going to start experiencing it again in Southern California. On the flip side, the North Pacific Northwest will continue to loosen up, which is actually going to drive up rates from Southern California up to the Pacific Northwest, which is a major freight lane. But I
Yeah.
think as we approach the end of, approach Memorial Day weekend and the end of the month, we'll see pressure come back to the Southern California markets, which are, the largest volume markets in the country. So it's going to be noticeable.
Okay. It again caught me by surprise. So I'm hoping that we'll see those gains again. But now we're getting into some of the more volatile changes over the last 7 days. So every single market in the South saw an uptick in the average carrier rate. Some of the biggest markets like Dallas and Fort Worth increased by 3% and 4%, with the entire South facing a 2.5% increase. Will the South continue to remain volatile through Memorial Day weekend?
It'll definitely continue to be a little volatile. I don't think, again, to the same extent as we saw through DOT week.
Yeah.
I think this is a nature of a lot of imports still coming in from Mexico, as the ports of Mexico are still somewhat backlogged. There's a lot of goods coming in.
Yeah.
It did catch me by surprise. Will be honest. I didn't think that most of the major markets in the South would see a greater increase than we saw in parts of Arizona and Southern California. So it's definitely somewhere to keep an eye on. We don't traditionally see the South get too tightened up in the back half of May and beginning of June. So
Yeah.
it's definitely somewhere to keep an eye on, and carriers to really feel out, as it could be a potential region to haul out of.
So here's where things start to get really wild. Now, this region had the largest increase over the last 7 days. It's the Southeast. Floridian markets had the biggest gains, with its breakout of Lakeland hitting nearly 9%, Jacksonville at 8%, and Tifton and Savannah, Georgia, both at 6.5%. It's worth noting this region saw an increase of close to 5% over the last week. Will this cool down anytime soon?
It's not going to cool down anytime soon, but the momentum upward is going to slow.
Okay.
I mean, this is the first year in, since pre-pandemic, really, that we've seen such strong seasonality come back to the markets. It's no stranger that the Southeast gets extremely tight in the back half of May, and we're seeing it. It doesn't matter where you're going out of the Southeast right now, rates
Yeah.
are climbing up. And we're going to continue to see this pressure, and that pressure is going to continue to move upward throughout the country. Like we said earlier, we're already seeing it in parts of the coastal region. It doesn't matter where you're hauling out of in Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, you're seeing increases in rates. But on the flip side, like I mentioned earlier, freight going there is not stopping its decline because it's such a hot market for carriers right now.
Yeah. Wow. Who knew DOT Blitz Week was going to end up this way? I can't wait to see what it's like next year, but let's not rush that because we have a 3-day weekend ahead of us. And so, with all of this red and this 3-day weekend, you've queued us up, or teed us up rather nicely, in terms of where you think we'll go. But overall, where do you think we'll land with Memorial Day weekend by the time we speak next week? Will we close the month out strong? What are your thoughts?
So I think we're actually going to end up at a lower rate per mile average nationally than
Yeah.
we are this past Monday. I think we're going to see the market soften through this week, but
Yeah.
then we are going to still experience that tightness from Friday to Tuesday. But it's not going to raise the average rate back up past where we are coming into this past Monday.
Yeah.
With that being said, I mean, there's a lot of disruptions that cause the volatility through Memorial Day weekend, facilities being closed on Monday, that freight being pushed to Friday or pulled to Friday or pushed to Tuesday, which leaves more freight on trucks longer, that, create more capacity issues. But overall, I think last year we handled Memorial Day weekend pretty well. And we're going to see that again this year, especially with already experiencing more softness in the market post DOT week than we saw last year.
Okay, well, we're going to close out another month next week. With that, next week we'll see you with an all-new episode of the Transfix Take podcast. Until then, have a great Memorial Day weekend. Drive safely, and we'll see you then. Bye, everyone.